female is as it were a mutilated male. Aristotle, they told you women were divine. That within their hearts resided warmth, healing, and sanctuary. That they loved more deeply, more purely, more softly than you ever could. That they were the calm to your storm, the salve to your suffering, the peace you didn't know you were searching for. And you believed it. Because everyone told you to. From the earliest myths and bedtime stories, she was the reward, the muse, the nurturing goddess, the maternal soul, the one who completes. And you? What were you? You were the one who chased, who fought, who knelt, who gave. You offered yourself willingly, completely, in exchange for the idea of being loved by her. But what if that mythology, the story you swallowed whole, wasn't merely mistaken, but intentionally crafted to blind you? What if women are not the gentle angels they were framed to be? What if the woman you love isn't your missing piece, but the mirror to your misperception? Aristotle didn't dress it up in poetry. He didn't romanticize femininity. He stripped it bare, observed without illusion. He didn't speak from hate, but from a cold detachment, an attempt to name what he believed was simply nature's pattern. To him, a woman was not the completed form, but the deviation, not lesser in spirit, but different in purpose. And while we've long moved past his biological reductionism, what remains compelling, uncomfortably so, is what his logic unlocks when we stop interpreting love through fantasy. This isn't about chromosomes or anatomy anymore. It's about what these deeper truths do to the fictions we hold close. What if love, in its rawest form, is not a mutual dance of equals, but a performance of hierarchy cloaked in affection? When you say, "I love her," are you loving her, or the fantasy she allows you to project onto her? Is your heart hers, or is it bound to your own aching reflection, disguised as intimacy? You say she nurtures you, maybe. Or maybe she reflects what you desperately crave because that reflection gives her influence. You think her softness is sincerity, but look again. That softness is an act, not necessarily malicious, often unconscious, but a performance nonetheless. Because if Aristotle was even slightly right, if a woman, by necessity, is an adapter, then everything she expresses has been shaped by a world she didn't design, but had to navigate. Not because she is weak, not because she is dishonest, but because she learned to survive by bending, molding, and adjusting in a structure that never centered her. In a world dominated by men, a woman learns to bend, not as a sign of love, but of necessity. So now you must ask when you look at her, are you seeing a person, or are you seeing a projection, a partner, or the symbolic cure for your unhealed wounds? You don't want a woman, you want the image of one. And she knows this. That's her hidden power. She doesn't need to control you. She only needs to reflect you, to become the emotional mirror you think you need. And once she becomes that echo, that voice that responds exactly the way you've longed for, you fall. Hard. You surrender. You offer your masculinity on the altar of her approval, desperate for her to say, "You are enough." But what if she never meant to say it? What if she never truly saw you? Only the version of you she could shape. Here's what most dare not admit: she isn't always searching for truth. She's searching for leverage. Not because she's cruel, but because she's strategic. While you speak from your heart, she listens with calculation. While you offer vulnerability like confession, she listens for patterns, your habits, your gaps, your leverage points. This is not evil. She is not the source. She is the response. She is an adaptation incarnate. An adaptation, in a system built against you, becomes power by other means. You call her emotional. No, she's surgical. You think she's reacting. No, she's scanning. She studies every word, every poise, every tilt of your voice. She learns your rhythms, your insecurities, your impulses. Because her survival has always depended on that precision. She had to learn one skill above all else: how to become indispensable to the very man who subconsciously fears her autonomy. Your love isn't love, it's dependence. And her care isn't care, it's calibration. She doesn't dominate your body. She occupies your psyche. She becomes the whisper you hear before making decisions, the comfort you seek when you fail, the praise you beg for like oxygen. And you call that connection. But that isn't a connection. That's obedience in disguise. Yet you still defend her. You protect the illusion. You say she's misunderstood. You say she's complicated. But maybe, just maybe, she's not confused at all. Maybe she's razor sharp, crystal clear. Maybe she knows exactly what you need her to be, and how little of herself she needs to offer to get everything she wants. Because when men built structures, laws, weapons, hierarchies, women built survival. And survival, when you're not the one in power, doesn't come through confrontation. It comes through invisibility, through softness, through influence without visibility. You conquered the outer world. She mastered the inner one. Not because she was less, but because she was watching. always watching, adapting, learning, shifting. Not to control your body, to colonize your needs. And you don't call that colonization, you call it chemistry. She lives in your hunger, in your shame, in your craving to be seen. That isn't love. That control is so elegant, so subtle, you name it fate. But fate doesn't remember your childhood trauma. She does. She remembers what makes you shrink, what tones of voice make you recoil. She learns your language so fluently that you start speaking her desires thinking they're your own. And when you offer yourself completely, when you hand over your sense of self for that fleeting sense of being enough, you aren't her man anymore. You're a resource, a vehicle, a mirror that reflects her power back to her. She doesn't move toward you, she moves around you. She flows, adapts. She doesn't demand power, she becomes the very thing power seeks. And that right there is not affection, it is evolution. And evolution couldn't care less about your feelings. So you worship softness, you kneel before strategy, and you wonder why you feel so hollow. Why do you give endlessly but feel invisible? It's because you never truly loved a woman. You loved the image you constructed of her, the one she helped you create, because it served her better than any truth ever could. Why would she destroy that illusion? Why would she disassemble the pedestal you built for her? It grants her rule without resistance, dominion without scrutiny. You call her mystery. You say she's hard to read. But there's nothing mysterious here. You just refuse to look closely. Because if you did, if you dared to admit that her kindness might be crafted, her affection might be a mirror not of your worth but her will, then you'd have to admit something more devastating, that the man you became to earn her love was never real. She didn't deceive you. You deceived yourself. She merely adapted to the role you cast her in. And once your usefulness fades, once you are no longer necessary, so does the performance. Then you cry out, she changed. She stopped loving me. But maybe she didn't change at all. Maybe she just stopped pretending. Maybe she no longer needed to play the character that kept you emotionally obedient. And now you're lost. Not because she left, but because your reflection left with her. You didn't lose love. You lost the sense of self you never had. You were never whole. You were a man stitched together by fragments of her attention. Just enough to keep you addicted, just little enough to keep you anxious. And that's not her fault, that's yours. You built your identity around her gaze. And when she stopped looking, your world fell apart. Aristotle wasn't attacking women. He was describing a function. But you can't handle that level of clarity. You'd rather be needed than real. You'd rather be adored through delusion than known through truth. But she sees you. She always did. She saw how badly you wanted her to be perfect, how deeply you longed to be enough. And she used it, not cruelly, but instinctively. Because when your position is reactive, not generative, your power becomes perception. You learn to influence not with force, but with precision. And she is precise. Every pause, every smile, every moment of silence, not random calculated. She isn't emotionally lost, she's emotionally literate. She reads the syntax of your heart better than you ever could. And slowly, word by word, pause by pause, she edits you until you forget your own lines and start performing hers. And this is where men break. When the pedestal tilts. When the illusion shows cracks. When you realize she's not admiring you. She's managing you. She's not lifting you up. She's rearranging you. And when you resist, when you try to reclaim your autonomy, she pulls back. Not out of pain, but because control has slipped. And without control, there is no leverage. And without leverage, there is no intimacy, not for her. Because intimacy, in her world, is not about connection. It's choreography. And you've been dancing to her rhythm, not even knowing the melody wasn't yours. You thought it was grace, but it was gravity. You didn't fall in love. You fell into orbit, around her moods, her silence, her affirmation. And you mistook orbit for closeness. But closeness without clarity is captivity. And you've been caged for so long, you mistook the bars for belonging. You used to have edges. Now you hesitate, you self-edit, you fold, not out of respect, out of fear, out of dependency. You say it's love. But love does not ask for the death of your will. Love does not demand erasure. And if the price of affection is your voice, your spine, your authenticity, then what you have is not love. It's obedience in disguise. And she knows it. She always knew. If you enjoyed our videos, make sure to give them a like. And don't forget to subscribe to Philosmind for more thought, provoking ideas and deep insights.